So hello, today we're at St Mary's Church in Tollesbury in Essex, and I'd like to talk to you about the history of the church and the village itself. So Tollesbury is a village in Essex. It's 2.4 miles from Toll St Darcy and 3.6 miles from Salcott Thurley. So Tollesbury is surrounded by the Essex farmland. And the creeks and marshes of the Blackwater estuary, as on this sign. Now the elevation is 25 metres or 82 feet in old money, and the population is around 2,800. Tollesbury has an ancient feel to it. In 2003 the Malden Archaeological Group unearthed remains of an Iron Age settlement here, predating the Romans, some 2,000 years ago. The Romans and Tollesbury. The Romans, it seemed, liked Tollesbury very much and built not one but two villas here. In 1928, Roman pavements were discovered near Mill Creek. The Saxons of Tollesbury. The name Tollesbury is believed to be connected to the toll which was paid by incoming ships in the port here. In 1066 there were two Saxon manors here, and Guthmund owned the smaller manor, consisting of 3 smallholders and 2 slaves and a salt house. Bullshire's Hall. We stand just a mile from Tollesbury's church on the land of Guthrum the Saxon. Move forward to 1264. Its lord was Hugh de Spencer, who was constable to the Tower of London. Now Hugh would join the Barons' War against Henry III and was slain in battle. Now this manor would be forfeited by the Crown. Today it's called Bullshire's Hall, named after the Bullshires, a family of knights from the 1200s. Now one night John Bullshire would walk this very lane in 1340 to fight alongside Edward the Black Prince in the siege of Calais. By 1388, John, by now 60 years of age and almost 40 years of continuous combat, went on crusade. He was made a Knight of the Garter in 1392, and he spent his last days around Tollesbury. Tollesbury Hall. Today Tollesbury's Hall was once the Saxon manor owned by the abbesses of Barking Abbey. Back then this manor was immensely wealthy, owning 7 slaves and 9 plough teams. Barking Abbey would continue to own Tollesbury Manor until the dissolution of the monasteries in the 1530s. In 1539, Henry VIII's chief lawyer, Thomas Cromwell, would be rewarded with this very manor for his shrewd prosecution of Anne Boleyn and how he had orchestrated the dissolution of the monasteries. Thomas Cromwell was executed in 1540. Look at this beautiful bird all the way from Australia. Wow, dinosaur, isn't it? What a beauty. So just 22 years later, in 1562, Thomas Howard would be granted Tollesbury's manor by Queen Elizabeth I. But on his agreement to marry Queen Mary, Queen of Scots, would see Thomas Howard also executed on Tower Hill in 1573. Now the Howards would live here until 1701. What fascinating history Tollesbury has. So here we are at Tollesbury's Sailing Club. So after World War One, Major McMullen would settle here, and he was a man of great ambition and talent, and of considerable talent in boat building. So by 1936, the Major and other boat enthusiasts would establish Tollesbury's Sailing Club, which still thrives to this day. Now each year the club puts on the Tollesbury Smack Race, which includes classic yacht racing. How you doing? Enjoy your day? Did you say 1970?
Yeah, this is one of the last ones, timber ones made, I think. They were made by Fairey Aircraft Company after the war. They diversified into boats. This is used to build the wooden mosquito bombers and things.
Oh really?
Yeah, it was hot moulded, 3 layers, made over metal moulds. But the guy who worked for de Havilland's, a chap called Charles Curry, he was director of the boat building side of Fairey's. You know, they specialised in wooden aircraft, things like those swordfish bombers and...
Very lightweight.
Well, I don't know how lightweight they were. The last successful plane, this is a fire, the last successful plane that Fairey's made was the Fairey Firefly, which saw service with the Fleet Air Arm in the Korean War. But it was the last gasp of the sort of driven aircraft really. I think the Fairey Firefly was about the last single engine plane.
So how far will you go out today?
I'll probably go up the river as far as Radio Caroline or something like that. I've got to be back to walk the dog, so it will become a lifeboat job really, unless you can walk home from the shore. I might go to Mersey for a cup of tea if it is cold.
Beautiful boat.
Yeah, they are lovely. They're quite popular still and quite sought after. People, they made fiberglass ones. The university used them for team racing, so a lot of people look to the timber ones because they're actually quicker than the fiberglass ones. Yeah, they're stiffer and lighter. So yeah, some of them made in the 1940s are still going.
Oh, bon voyage! That's fast, isn't it? So here we are. We've made our way to the Tollesbury sail lofts. These striking industrial buildings. For these are the old sail lofts used to store the sails from the J-class yachts through the winter months of the old days. Now these were actually built in 1906 from sawn timber from Malden. Now notice how each unit rests on legs. To adapt to the high tides here. Notice the phone number. Now if we look just beyond this boat, we've got this lovely pool, which is actually called the Woodup Pool. It's quite unique in what I'm about to show you. For it's a saltwater swimming lake owned by Tollesbury Parish Council and is open from May till September. Now if we look, we can see how the lake tops up from the actual water here when it floods, I'm guessing. So each year fundraising helps keep it free for all to use. Just don't wear your best swim gear because it is salt water. But it is quite unique, isn't it? Look at this. Wonderful Essex, isn't it? So originally the Woodup Pool was built in 1907 and funded by Lady Valerie de Crispingi from Malden. Oysters and Tollesbury. So stand here as I do you can sense the strong connection of the past and the sea. So oysters and the men that landed them have for thousands of years come here by boat in this very bay. Now in the 17th century, oysters and packing houses were here on the saltings. Now the packed oysters were sent off to London, again by boat. Now by 1876 there were 120 smacks, a type of boat, and 600 oystermen around these parts. And an oyster apprenticeship would last 4 years. And right now we've got a gentleman that's working with oysters now, in 2023. So they go off to London?
Yeah, they go to London, yeah, they go to Kensington, farmers market.
Oh.
Yeah.
So they're the best oysters around, I
Of
would
course
say.
they are, yeah.
Blackwater.
Blackwater oysters.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Tollesbury's Granary. So stand about as far as you can go in Tollesbury and you will see this magnificent building. Well, I think it's magnificent. So this was once used as a granary in the 1800s, and it would have been a very busy place. Okay, let's look at something quite unique, a lighthouse ship. My big noisy boots, size 10. What a lovely day, isn't it? Getting distracted as usual, but in the distance we can see the lighthouse ship. So here we can clearly see the lighthouse on top. It was built in 1954 and called Trinity. Morning. Now, Trinity was stationed off the Welsh coast in the 60s and 70s, keeping ships off the rocks. Now, Trinity was moved here in 1991, and today it provides adventure, learning and accommodation for children, adults and families. See how the high tide here just caught me out. I was just standing there and it just literally, as I'm talking to you now, it's coming over. So one of these gentlemen, the engineers, were telling me that they've put some more accommodation underneath. They've put a new pile in here and basically upgrading it as a new ramp. It's absolutely beautiful here, isn't it? Just getting the high tide. Look, just crossing the footpath. Tollesbury and smuggling. Now, like so many places on the Blackwater estuary, Tollesbury was legendary in the world of smuggling. I read that in 1819 an honest man, Daniel London, came across 152 tubs of buried spirits and delivered to the customs men at Malden. On his return to Tollesbury, the smugglers threatened to lynch Daniel London, who took refuge in his house. He was soon rescued by the customs men, and 11 more barrels were discovered, sealing Daniel's fate, who was swiftly cast into Chelmsford's jail. Just look at this amazing old ship, or boat, shall we say. Actually needs a bit of work, but what a beauty. So now it seems that I've arrived at the right time. I've always wondered what it's like here when the road floods, because there is a warning that on high tides the road actually floods. And now I can see why. You can see it's still rising.
Good luck, mate.
See ya. So that gentleman is a professional photographer, and you can see this is a perfect place.
I lived at City Road opposite Wyatt's Yard, and my dad had that mast there. That was a bottom lid mast, a big mast, and it was all. Yeah, I did read. They thought.
Tollesbury's at Lockup. We've made our way inland and look upon Tollesbury's village lockup from the year 1700. Set between the church and the marketplace. Now any criminal, drunkard, brawler or thief would spend time here, awaiting transportation to a courtroom for sentencing. So as you can see, it's located at the northwest corner of the churchyard for maximum humiliation. The King's Head. Tollesbury village once had 6 pubs. Today the King's Head is the sole survivor. And a very busy pub it is. Darts, pool, poker and quiz nights. In some ways how pubs used to be when I was growing up. Some years ago its landlord Paul Yull received a 25-year long service award. But I read in 1895 a William Anthony was a landlord here for 33 years. So I like to remember forgotten pubs of villages, and we're going to look at one now. The Plough and Sail, which is here. So it's once frequented by oystermen and farmers. Today it's a private residence. But in 1885 Mrs. Blake refused to serve Mr. Smith the oysterman because of his condition. She said he was a bit rolly. Basically he was 3 sheets to the wind, drunk. Now we have made our way to St Mary's Church of Tollesbury. Now the walls are of boulder clay and the upper part of the tower is in red brick. Now the dressings are of clunch and Roman brick. Now in 1875 this ancient church was renovated. Many Roman tiles, including flue tiles, were found in the walls of the nave, the tower and the south doorway, meaning they were either brought from Toll St Knights or Mersey Island, or more likely there was a villa here. Just to think that a Roman villa perhaps stood here 1900 years ago. Now, isn't that something? And as you can see, the good folk of Tollesbury remember their deceased from the wars. So we shall begin with the West Tower, which is built in 3 stages. Now the lower stage is 11th century, it's one of the earliest in Essex. Now the above stages were added in the 16th or 17th centuries. So now we shall walk through this Victorian west doorway. Now Norman walls were typically 3'6" thick and built for defensive purposes. I measured this wall, it's actually 4'8" thick. And as you know, I always get a view of the doorway, or through the doorway, so this will be a west doorway. It's a shame the sun's gone away now. Okay, we shall now look at this very impressive tower arch. Now the lower arch is actually 14th century and has 4 chamfered orders, quite an expensive build of the time. Now if we look above, we can see the original arch. Now this is 11th century and is very rare, and it's partly built in Roman brick. So as you enter the tower, you have the Tollesbury tapestry. And this was to celebrate the new millennium. The residents of Tollesbury made this tapestry, and it shows the key features of the village. And you can see a layout of the streets and roads here. Now, if we look above the tapestry, we have this fine charity board. And this is dedicated to a very kind man indeed, Robert Taylor, in 1652. He left to the poor of Tollesbury 6 acres of land. Now, the benefits would go to the old, the infirm, and the poor. And it says that the rent will be distributed by the trustees, who it names below, in bread on Sunday after divine service. So as you enter, you see that there's a display cabinet which has got cards and bookmarkers. And then on the opposite side, it looks like a notice board for the village. So I've come across all different ways in which churches display notices, but this works really well, doesn't it? Okay, now we shall enter the nave itself. So now we have entered the nave, which measures 41 feet by 21 feet, and it's built in the late 11th century. So if we begin with the roof, I have no information, but I'm assuming this roof was rebuilt in the 1872 restoration. And I like the way that the Union Jack is suspended there in between all the trusses. And then we've got the St George's flag on the opposite side. Remember, at one time, churches would have been adorned with many flags. So if we look at the most westerly window set in the north wall, I actually thought this was an ancient lancet window, but it's actually modern Victorian. But when I look this up, underneath the plaster to the left is buried the original arrow slit window, the lancet window, somewhere here. The actual glass itself, I think it's St George, I'm not sure. If we look below the window, we have an embroidery on the wall. And you can see it's a monogram of Jesus Christ, IHS. Now we should look at our first brass memorial. And this is dedicated to Major William Maskell. Now, William joined the British Army in 1907, and in 1914 he served in Flanders with the Royal Field Artillery. Now, by 1916, William received the Military Cross for conspicuous bravery and he was very popular with his men and fellow officers. Now, Major William Maskell died of wounds received in 1917 in France. And the window above is dedicated to him, and it actually shows St. Ced and not, as I said earlier, St. George. So next to the Major's Memorial, we have the Roll of Honour for those that served and died in World War One. It's a huge amount of people, isn't it? If we go down, we have those that served and died, I presume, in World War II as well. Okay, if we go into the south wall, these boards show the baptism roll, and I guess it shows everybody that's been baptised here. So as I do, I always notice things. If we look at this, if this is the 14th century stonework, the stone jamb, just look at that, you can see where it's all been scraped by the mason. So there's a small board here on the wall, and it simply says, some of the rectors, vicars and curates, the parish church of St Mary's, Tollesbury. Then it gets really good because it says from 1232 in the reign of King Henry III to the present day. And if we look above, there's a brass effigy, and I'm apologising, there's no information on this, but I'm guessing it's probably the 1400s. So now we are looking at the south doorway itself. So now we look upon the original 11th century doorway, built entirely from Roman brick, and its arch is tympanum in design. Now we shall enter this 1872 south porch. Now we can see how the builders in the 15th century added this two-centred arch and chamfered jambs. Now the infill above used Roman bricks. In my mind, this meant that a Roman ruin must have been here in the Tudor period. If we look to the right, we can see the damaged 16th century stoop where folk would have dipped their fingers into the holy water and made the sign of the cross before entering this church. You can also see its base has been smashed, probably in the time of Cromwell. Above we can see this sort of angled drip tray, or I guess to stop the rain from entering the doorway for the parishioners. Now if you look to the left, we've got this really quite nice chest. Now in 1587 an inventory of church furniture here included a plain oak chest with 2 iron straps and 3 locks. We can still see the iron straps. Three locks. See its dovetail construction. Now this very chest was used to hold the communion cup for the poor and to hold the parish register. And I also read that in the 19th century this chest was used in the tower and held the broken bell ropes. Now we shall concentrate on this fine north window. So firstly, the actual frame, the stone window frame, is 15th century. Now we look upon this window, which is called the Seafarer's window. Now the centre light shows Christ in resurrection to his disciples. The left panel shows 4 yachts which took part in the America's Cup from 1811. Now Tollesbury sailors took part in 15 of these races. And I actually met a lady in the pub and she explained that her father was to do with one of these races, or these yachts. Now if you look upon the right panel, which shows the barges and smacks which are famous for these parts. You see the heavy connection between the sea and the boats. Now if you look beneath, there's a panel that explains in great detail about these boats. Okay, we shall move towards the east side. Now we're going to look at this very unusual font. So this is an 18th century font built in 1718. So a John Norman in the same year entered the church service here, talking and swearing. Now the good church warden Robert Joyce charged John £5 as a fine, so this font could be built. You can imagine £5 in 1718, huge amount of money. And it simply reads, "Good people all, I pray take care, that in ye church thou does not swear, as this man did." Don't you just love our history? Isn't it incredible? Now just to the side we have the rood staircase. Now this blocked up doorway was from the 15th century, and it would have gone to the rood loft above. Now next to the rood stairway we have this magnificent organ dedicated to John Battersby, Vicar of Tollesbury, for 43 years. Now if we go over to the north wall, we've got this fine pulpit. And it is made from chestnut wood. And is painted and gilded, and I have no further information. Can't resist climbing the steps. So, tucked away in the corner, just behind the organ, it's easily missed, is this fantastic brass effigy. Now this shows Thomas Freshwater of 1517 and his wife Margaret. Now Thomas is dressed in a fur-lined gown. Remember, this is 1517. And his wife Margaret wears a pedimental headdress. Now if we look below, we can see the couple's 9 daughters. And we can also see a recess for their two sons. And just tucked away, I think this is a description of the couple. So just in front of the chancel we have this fine lectern. Which I've got no information on, but it's a lovely piece of craftsmanship, isn't it? So I always say when visiting a church, it's always worth having a closer look at the furniture. Look at this. We can clearly see the connection between the sea with Tollesbury. And the land. So now we've moved on to the chancel itself, which measures 16 feet by 31 feet. So this fine chancel was rebuilt in 1871 by Habbershon and Brock, the architects. Now Habbershon went into partnership with Brock, the firm's clerk, and would design churches and chapels across England, even relocating a London burial ground. Now in this year, 1871, Queen Victoria opens the Royal Albert Hall in London. Now, if we look upon this brass memorial on the north wall, this is to Robert Binney, captain of the Essex Regiment. Now, Robert fought in the battles of the Somme from 1916 right through to Passchendaele in Ypres in 1918. And sadly, Captain Robert Binney died of his wounds in France in 1918. Now looking at this memorial here, and this is for Thomas Gardner of 1654. So notice the marble scrolls and carvings and family shields, beautiful craftsmanship. Now we're going to move over to this exquisite reredos. And all I can tell you is it's by Christopher Webb. I've got no date. But it speaks for itself. Look at the quality of the craftsmanship, the carvings. You can see the angels and fine tracery. Got the IHS in the corner. Wow. Now if we look above, we've got the east window. Now these beautiful set of panels are by Charles Kemp. Now Charles Kemp designed over 4,000 stained glass windows from his London studios from 1866. Now I read that Kemp never married and died from a common cold in 1907. It's just splendid, isn't it? Detail. Now this is the final panel. Now today Kemp's work is much studied and admired. You can see why. Wow. It's a shame I couldn't have got closer. Okay, now we shall finish up and go outside. So, okay, let's go outside. So here we have a closer view of the red brick tower. So if we talk about the bells of this fine church, so St Mary's Church has an incredible 10 bells cast by some of England's master bell founders, including a 1604 bell by Miles Gray I, a 1661 bell by Miles Gray III, his grandson, We also have a Thomas Gardner of Sudbury, and he cast a bell here in 1728. And many bells were cast in the Whitechapel foundry by the famous Mears family. So you can clearly see the more recent rebuild of the chancel, I think from 1871. You see they've added some detail there. And we have some fine headstops here and here. We can also see that the cemetery goes off down here. It's quite an unusual layout because the houses wrap themselves all the way round. So you can see from the north side there's a sort of ancient footpath. Makes me wonder how many people have walked this very route in the last 1,000 years. If you look right on the top, you've got the pigeons and a weather vane with a boat on it. So I guess this building in front is the vestry. And here we can see on the north side a clock, which I'm assuming was put in the Victorian period. And it overlooks the market square. So St Mary's Church is open daily and the church carries out baptisms, weddings and funerals. So thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it.